Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Take Back Manufacturing with Industry 4.0. Now, just a few housekeeping notes before we begin. We are recording today's and everyone who has registered will get an email with a link to the on-demand version and a copy of today's presentation slides within the next few days. First, the session will run for a total of 60 minutes. Please note we will include time for Q&A at the very end. If you do have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A panel on your GoToWebinar console, and we will address them towards the end of the presentation. If for some reason we don't have time to address all of your questions today in today's live event, please be assured we will follow up with you directly following the webinar. So next, I would like to introduce you to our host, Kevin Hollis. Kevin is a regional sales manager with SHEA Global and brings 25+ years of experience assisting clients to resolve operational challenges through implementing ERP, CRM, and BI strategies. Kevin works with business owners and executive management to facilitate business cases and solutions that deliver results. Welcome, Kevin.
Thanks very much, Maureen, and welcome everybody today to our session on Take Back Manufacturing and Industry 4.0. Nigel's got a great session to walk through with you today. And just as we introduce today's session, I'd like to give you a quick introduction to SHEA as your hosts. Basically, our why statement is that we do believe there's potential for excellence in every business. And as you deal with our team and Nigel here today, you'll see that our passion is really guiding our clients to operational excellence. As a global company, our head offices are in the Toronto, Canada area, but we're covered on the West Coast as well, through the UK, India, and in the Philippines. We have customers currently in over 35 countries in ERP, CRM, demand-driven MRP, and supply chain management. Before we jump into the session, I'd let you know, if you are one of our colleagues in the Canadian market space, there are a couple funding programs that will help fund these initiatives. And subsequent to today's presentation, we can take a little deeper dive. But for those of you that are looking at taking the 4.0 journey, one of the first steps you may want to do is a technical assessment on your readiness. And that can be funded up to $25,000 as a grant from the federal government through the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters Association. This is currently running through to the end of next calendar year. And right now is open to businesses and manufacturing in the Ontario market space. In addition to that, there is other initiatives for automotive supply chain. If you're in the automotive supply chain with at least 50% of your revenues coming from that sector, you can submit your application through to October this year and get projects up to 50% funding. And that can include equipment, software, licensing, training, and overall project for innovation improvements. Two other incentives include hiring incentives. There's a number right now to bring students on, interns, apprenticeships as well too. And two of those are administered as the Canadian and Ontario Job Grant or the Federal Ontario Training Program. Again, if you do have any questions on those specifically afterwards, we'd like to introduce you to those and how to navigate application of those. The final one I want to just touch on is the relief fund, federally funded now to specifically focus on COVID-related business impacts. There's a Southern Ontario stream there you can get up to $500,000, and a Northern Ontario stream that will provide up to $250,000 based on your eligibility. So if you're post-presentation today have questions on that, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce my friend and colleague, Nigel Southway. He's an independent business consultant in manufacturing and engineering environments and the author of Cycle Time Management. Among many initiatives and areas of expertise, Nigel consults, educates, and coaches worldwide on subject matters such as continuous improvement and lean initiatives, sustainable supply chains, advanced manufacturing and engineering, and Industry 4.0 strategies and implementation. He's been an architect of change for many major organizations across many industrial sectors, and is also a leading advocate for the Take Back Manufacturing Forum and the North American Reshoring Initiative in Canada. Welcome, Nigel.
Well, thank you. Just make sure I got control here. Okay. Well, a little bit of technical stuff. Good afternoon, and thanks for that great introduction, Kevin. And yeah, it's true. I've been in the manufacturing industry a long time, and lived through most of the third industrial revolution that we're going to talk about. So I've been there a while, and I've been assisting providers and practitioners now grapple with the fourth industrial revolution. And basically, as an author, I've one of the early authors on lean thinking. I've had the opportunity to educate and assess and assist many clients on the journey of lean thinking across many sectors, and I've actually now got a very clear view of how Industry 4 can support these sectors. So I'm hoping to pass that on today if I can. So the agenda is I'm going to talk about take back manufacturing. That's really a part of the treatment here in terms of understanding where we are in Canada as far as manufacturing is concerned. And then I'll jump in and explain Industry 4, and I'll talk about how they go together, how Industry 4 can be a booster shot and an essential ingredient for taking back manufacturing. And I'll talk about how to actually go on the journey for Industry 4. So that's going to be the agenda. So the first thing is I'm going to talk about take back manufacturing. And I want to tell you, it's kind of a personal story. I talk to a lot of people in manufacturing, and a lot of us have been through, if you've been in it for a while, you've been through quite a journey in the last 30 years as far as manufacturing and where it's been is concerned. And it's been tough for a lot of manufacturers to see how this is going to end up. But this is a personal story, and I'll give it to you this way. In about the late 90s, I was asked to go with some clients to Mexico and set up a Mexico operation as part of NAFTA manufacturing. That went pretty good. We had fun doing that. We learned that, what it's like to operate in another country and bring on a manufacturing base in that country. And then later in 2004, I was asked to start helping with globalized manufacturing. And I was asked to go to China. Now, there's a lot of pretty things and people in China, but Chinese manufacturing in 2004 wasn't one of them. And it was a struggle. We went through quite a period of understanding how to get this done. Eventually, after some years, we started to get success, and we celebrated it. And I made a lot of friends, and we got a lot of stuff done, and installed a fairly strong manufacturing capability. And then I came home to Canada to this image of Canadian manufacturing, this kind of hollowed out, not so good kind of environment that we unfortunately were faced with after we started to offshore a lot of our manufacturing. And I realized this was a North American problem, not just a Canadian problem. And we had economists telling us it was the post-industrial revolution, and we were part of it, and that the future of manufacturing was going to look like this. And a lot of us were upset with that and took it very seriously and were worried. And that's, in fact, was the genesis for the Take Back Manufacturing Initiative. So about mid-2011, we started and formed a forum that consisted of a significant number of associations and societies in Canada that wanted to understand just where we were headed. And so that was really the start for Take Back Manufacturing. We used it as a mechanism to understand and move on from here and try to be an advocate for how we can do better with manufacturing in Canada. Just to put it in context, this is a bit of a history and also up-to-date slide of where we are in Canada as far as manufacturing is concerned. So this is trade deficit just for the manufacturing portion of our economy. And you can see that since 2000, when it all kind of started, we've lost a lot of ground, like 10 times worse trade balance in manufacturing. So we're actually buying in and consuming much more of other people's manufactured products than our own, to the factor 10 times. So that's not good, and it's still getting worse. We're not in any shape or form improving. So our initiatives for TBM were threefold. First one was getting government to understand how they must help level the playing field for our industrial sectors with better policies. And we do see, and we have seen some realignment of political will. We do, as you've heard today, some investment by government in helping manufacturing, but there's still a lot to do to get that playing field level. On the left-hand side, education, we saw a propensity to be more focused on education and training and experience-based learning. And in fact, we've been poking at the educators to try to balance the educational system so that it's more hands-on and productive for the people that are going to end up in manufacturing. And on the right-hand side, we see industry needs to continuously improve. We've seen that some sectors have lost the plot and they've offshored everything and they've stopped improving their own operations. And so what you're going to hear today is one of the tools, which is Industry 4, to start to remobilize the industry sectors. So that's kind of where we were. We've shared with the guys south of the border. We've done a lot of work understanding the differences, and of course we're very jealous in a way of the kind of work that's being done south of the border on the focus on manufacturing. But obviously, as advocates, we never give up. So that's Take Back Manufacturing. And really, it's just an information base that we provide on how the health of manufacturing and where it needs to go and what the ingredients for success are. And one of the things we talk about is Industry 4. So I like to explain Industry 4 a certain way to you so you can understand how it works and how it might be assistive. First of all, we've been through 3 revolutions in industry already, steam, electricity, and also adding computers to the game. And now we're going to move into another age of technological disruption, which is more lean, green, and automated and integrated in Industry 4. So first of all, some of us have been through this before. We've seen industry without computers, where we're using paper tape for computer programming, etc. Very basic. When I started my apprenticeship in '65, this is what you were faced with. It was not computerized. By '80, we had some degree of automation. It was still steam driven in some respects. Now we enjoy tremendous power of computers, mobility of computers, and a lot of stuff that's actually linked to the point of use in the manufacturing process, whether it be manufacturing assembly, testing, or even inspection. So we've got a lot of tools now, and we've actually put computers into our processes. But unfortunately, they're still not where they should be. There's still a question mark, because what we've done in a lot of cases is we've trapped the people between the process and the computer. And what Industry 4 is about is what we call cyber physical, which is to actually connect computers to the process without human intervention. That is really the biggie as far as Industry 4 is concerned. And I'll show you that the next slide. Really, this is a lot of high-tech stuff here, but we're deploying it with human hands, and we're deploying it with humans, which is still a high-cost activity. There's significant errors, there's some inaccurate data issues or opportunities, and sometimes it's not real time. So that's still a pre-cyber physical picture. And so where we want to go is cyber physical. And so one way to put this in perspective is if you see a hand, you don't want it. Okay, so that's really the message for cyber physical. No hands, please. Okay. So there's 5 advanced technologies driving these disruptions that provide for innovation. I'm just going to talk about the top 3 because they really are appropriate more for Industry 4. And the first one is people talk about networks. Well, the word is really connectivity. What we're trying to achieve is connectivity. Some people call it the Internet of Things, but we're really talking about how well we connect all our devices and all of our processes together with real-time computer networks. And there's been growth here. We've seen an awful lot of advancement in not only making networks work, but also how well we've connected our processes together. And this is underway, and there's some degree of success. The second one is what I call advanced automation. They call it robotics, but it really is getting advanced automation to include smart technology such as sensor technology. So what we want our new equipment to do is have a lot more visualness and ability to actually plan and direct itself through the process rather than be pretty dumb, like unfortunately some of our early automation, and get away from the button pushing, I guess. So unfortunately, this area has been undercapitalized for some time. It's flatlined, and that's because we've been distracted with using low-cost labor countries to do our manufacturing, and we've not invested our capital. But as you can see, there's an upturn now in the last little while, and so that we are alive and well, we just need to get on and continue that journey of putting advanced automation into our factories. Those are the 3. The last of the 3 is artificial intelligence. Now, okay, it sounds pretty highbrow. What it is, we've got tremendous capability of computer power now. Now what we got to do is also harness that with some algorithms that take the sting out of the decision-making processes. So when you've got repetitive decision-making to do, use artificial intelligence to build that capability, so you take away the overhead of making decisions. And that's really what artificial intelligence is. So we put those together, you're good, except one more thing. We can put technology and systems together, but we need it to handshake with continuous improvement via lean, because we must ensure that we don't automate waste. One of the tendencies when you add automation to anything is to make sure you don't go the wrong way and actually put waste, so leave waste in and then automate it. That would be a very dangerous, big mistake as we move actually into Industry 4. So that's in fact, the elements you need for Industry 4. And so I'm going to really then break ranks now and talk about how Industry 4 is essential to taking back manufacturing. Now, understanding Industry 4, what's it doing for us? Well, let's take a look at the economy and how it's reshaping. Businesses are going to reshore to local trade jurisdictions. And there's many reasons for that. Some are political, some are economic, and some are logistical. So I'll explain. Liberalized global trade is not working. Certainly, a lot of people believe now, including some of the economists that thought it was great, that we actually have to rethink globalization. And I certainly want to focus on globalized manufacturing, which is where you take these container ships, by the way, who are quite frankly, one of the biggest polluters on the planet, and you take materials from one place to another to grab a low-cost labor, and then add it, send it back to your consumers. So this is under question mark now. Globalized manufacturing is under question, even though we've built great supply chains. Because when you do a lean study on that global supply chain, there's a lot of length in those supply chains, a lot of delays, and you've got a lot of waste in those ships, a lot of transportation waste, and distance and time. And so what we've got are materials being put on ships, moved to a low-cost country, and then sent back through a large inventory conduit to our consumers. Now that works okay when you've got low interest rates, but imagine how this is going to work, all this inventory trapped in the system, when you've got normalized interest rates. Interest rates are on the floor right now. When they go back to where they should be for a capitalistic society, we're going to have problems with the amount of waste in this system. And so what people are saying in all different ways is we want to evolve to a localized trade block, shorten that supply chain. And so we've got a tight, low inventory environment for our manufacturing to our consumers. Now, of course, there'll still be raw resources traded internationally because people don't have resources. They need them for their own economy, but we don't want them back, right? We need to balance trade on things we don't do, other people do, and there'll be knowledge trade as long as it's paid for. So, by the way, we can sink the ships. We don't need them anymore. We can redeploy them, repurpose them for something else. The other comment about short supply chains and being local to your customer is it's a great incubator for innovation. One of the things that we've all said is that local manufacturing provides incubation for innovation. If you've got manufacturing elsewhere, you're missing a component of the incubation system for innovation. So the big issue is, this could be the mantra now, make much more of what you consume with more of your own resources. That would be a sustainability statement for manufacturing in the future. So we're really questioning globalized manufacturing, but we must be realistic. We know there will still be globalized activities. Some manufacturing will not be localized, but we need to get to a better balance point, and that's really what's happening. People are looking at a better balance point and opening up the thoughtware to actually say, let's look at where globalization makes sense and whether we should be more localized. So here's the real big issue. Long supply chains are far less sustainable, whether it be economic or ecological. Okay, so there's an issue that needs to be addressed, which is long supply chains. We can do that with localized trade blocks. So here's the comment. If you have this short supply chain and you've got everything in place, there's still an issue, which is that how does this Industry 4 help manufacturing? How do we actually use it to bring back manufacturing? How does it level the playing field between low-cost labor and developed countries? Because some people will understand that low-cost labor is an advantage. Well, let me show you some numbers that are pretty typical. They're not for every business, but they're kind of classically common across many platforms of industry. And this is why business will reshore to these local trade jurisdictions. And I was there in 2010 in China, and we were enjoying, we thought, a 25% advantage in being offshore. But as we got to 2015, we started to see that our costs, our real costs, the hidden costs were larger, and that eroded that advantage. And also some of the costs in the third world countries that we were operating in were going up because we were enriching their economy. And so Boston Consulting Group in 2015 stated that in a lot of cases, we were at a tipping point as far as whether we should stay home or go offshore. By 2020, in a lot of cases, when you really run the numbers, you should challenge free trade or global trade, because we can now see, even without the tariffs, probably a 7 or 8% advantage. And with tariffs, certainly, it's gone the other way, and staying home makes sense. If we then add Industry 4 to the equation, and we do that even in a third world country, we actually suppress the ratio of labor and overhead and the differential of that. So instead of 5 times labor and overhead ratio between onshore and offshore, we've now got only a couple of, 2 times ratio. And so the labor contribution, whatever its cost, is a smaller part of the game. And it's actually a lower differential. So reducing that labor content with Industry 4 takes away the advantage that you'd get from a low-cost country journey. So staying home makes sense. However, the other point that brings it home for us is that being close to the consumer is far more important, where you got more flexibility, lower inventory, and that innovation thing I talked about. So there's a lot of thinking now. A lot of corporations are looking at reshoring for these reasons. It's economic, and also it's to do with strategic advantage with customers. So that's really the story. We've got take-back manufacturing. We have an opportunity to bring it back. We've got tremendous leverage with Industry 4 if we get it right. And now we got to talk about how to do that. So what is the journey? What is the roadmap we should follow for Industry 4? Well, the first thing to tell you is that Industry 4 to me is the next, as a lean practitioner, many years of installing lean in businesses, it feels the same. It's going to be a holistic look at the business. We're going to be looking from end to end of the business, and it's going to be a fairly large undertaking. And so it's going to be almost like a lean journey. So if you've done lean already, you're in a good position to strap on the Industry 4 component. If you haven't done any lean work, then you need to start again with lean and Industry 4 combined. And you're going to need 2 things to do that well. You're going to need a strong vision of where your business is going and what lean will look like when you've done it, and what Industry 4 will look like. And you need a roadmap to get there. You need both those things. So this roadmap, the first step is vision and scope. So let's just talk about how we get that vision for Industry 4. Well, the first thing is, let's talk about lean and what it used to look like. Before we leaned out of business, it always looked vertical. There was always these vertical silos of information flow, and it was difficult. And what we all learned was that, and this is pretty old stuff, is that by going into a lean operation, you would flow in horizontal paths through the business. You'd have these loops through the business that your business would float. You may still be organized vertically, but your process would operate horizontally. That's lean thinking. So what I've done is taken that lean thinking structure, and I've moved it into a structure for Industry 4 so we can still understand it. So here are the 5 key business processes or loops in the business organized for a lean discussion that's compatible with Industry 4. So let's basically did this, and then we lay on top of that a block diagram of the major system functions you need for Industry 4. And it doesn't matter who you are, you might use some of these less than others, but they all exist in Industry 4, and you got to pick and choose how it's going to suit your business. Let me just talk you through a few of the major boxes. First of all, let's talk about the biggie, sometimes the elephant in the room in a lot of businesses, the ERP system. It's fair to say that I don't really have an opinion on how big the ERP system should be or what software it should be. I'm more concerned about you having the functionality that looks like an ERP system. You need to be able to manage demand. You need to be able to process it through your business with known capacity and get to the other side. So I won't dwell on ERP other than to say that you do need your version of a strong, robust ERP to do Industry 4. Next thing you need is, and it's on top line, one of the other major components, we need a strong computer-aided engineering environment for new products if you do that. Everything from simulating the outcome of the new product right through to the testing of the product. All this can be computerized. It's getting rid of the white spaces in the engineering center and making sure that it's all integrated. That's a big undertaking. A lot of tools out there to do this. They're not that well integrated, but Industry 4 would demand that you do that well so that it's part of your business machine. So CAE is going to be a component that needs to be well understood in Industry 4. The other component is undergunned right now is the QMS system, quality management system. You know, a lot of people have ISO, you know, say what you do and do what you say, but it's more than that. You also need a very strong, capable new product introduction system to bring the new products through the birthing process into manufacturing and get them to the customer on time. That needs to be well understood, and that can be automated. It needs to be part of Industry 4. Plus, if you're going to make the kind of changes happen that we're talking about here, you're going to need a very formal and capable continuous improvement system, which is the CI system. So you can take on projects and organize them across the organization and get them done. So that's the QMS system, very important. And there's a lot of tools developing in that space, but quite frankly, there's a lot of work to do yet. The part in the middle is probably where most people spend their time in understanding Industry 4. And it's a structure. And I just want to explain the green part. The green part is the actual physical process, the supply chain, bringing the parts in, storing them and so forth. Then you've got your automation centers, basically your value-added step inside that orange box. You have two things in there. You've got value-added steps, probably automated process steps, and then you've got work-in-process activities, probably between them. If you can't link them together, you'll have a work-in-process activity. And you'll have a distribution center in some businesses. So let me tell you what an MES needs. To run an MES properly, you need three components. We're going to be putting a lot of automation, a lot of systems, a lot of complexity, a lot of real-time stuff that's going to be hooked together. So we can't do maintenance with a oily rag and a wrench. It's going to have to be a very high-level system to maintain this kind of a system. And so TPMS, Total Productive Maintenance System, needs to be part of Industry 4. It needs to be something where you can actually manage your reliability of your process using computers and a very high-level capability. Reliability will be an issue as you add complexity of systems to anything. Second box, in the center box for a manufacturing execution system, is the factory data collection system. Some people have them. They're not properly evolved yet. So I'm going to explain a factory data collection system. If the factory data collection system is right for you, it's probably able to talk to your business system, your ERP system, and it's able to download and upload information as to where that machine's going and what it's working on. But you need to be able to measure its performance with overall equipment effectiveness and make sure that you've got all this stuff working together. And quite frankly, this whole environment needs to be built so that at the grassroots level of the process, you have the ability to make continuous improvement, take action on problems, fix them, send alerts to people, pull teams together, solve real-time problems. So a modern factory data collection system is, in fact, the core of a manufacturing execution system because it actually manages the actual physical part of the manufacturing process. It does it. It's got to do it at a very high level with people that are trained to use such a system. So factory data collection, very central. Last item is what's called SIMS. Now, if you've got work in process moving between value-added work centers, then you're going to need a smart inventory management system to connect the dots between the two. And so what this is typically, and I'll go to the next slide, it's easier, is you build a complete GPS system for manufacturing, as I call it, where you put sensors in your process so that everything that moves is sensorized, because this is space age stuff, but it's possible, the technology exists. Everything that moves is sensorized and everything inside a zone is monitored. So you can actually see within 3 inches where your inventory is, everything's got some degree of connectivity. And so I'll even put sensors on the things that move stuff around, as well as the stuff that's being moved. And I can then know where things are. I can add sensors to these control tags. So I can actually say to a particular work order, have you experienced any heat, or if you're in the food industry, for example, and you've got the ability to measure temperature and humidity and length of time things have been sitting around, you can manage your certification process a lot better. So this is actually an opportunity to actually take away shop floor transactions and shop floor unknowns as far as where your inventory is. And of course, you can tie it to your machines and tie it to your people so that you can actually monitor things like safety and time on the job and so on and so forth. So this is all where it's going from what I call a cyber physical installation for inventory management, which will eliminate transactions and make things real time. So putting all that together, and that's the SIM environment explained, we now have the ingredients for a manufacturing execution system. So inside that structure, that center structure, we now have the opportunity to actually not necessarily put the lights out, but be able to run the thing without the poor operators trapped between the computers and the process. Now, I mentioned the structure, and the reason I did that, a lot of people can use that structure now as a measurement device, as a visioning device rather for their business. So the next step in the roadmap is a readiness survey. What we have to do with a readiness survey is realize that if you have a vision, you still need to figure out the gap. So we would form a joint client provider readiness survey team. You would do this because you want to understand how the technology is going to work with the application, with the vision. And then you would put together, you put together an operational activities review, and then you would provide your vision and get to a gap analysis. So what this readiness survey does is it takes the vision and makes sure you understand how it's going to plug and play with the toolkit that you have for Industry 4. So what you can end up with is a detailed scorecard, and I want to explain how you would put together your own version of a detailed scorecard. So we've got the structure. We're going to use the same structure that we had before. We're just going to turn it back into a list of key business process steps, and then put that into a grid, and then put that into a checklist format and use it as a scorecard. So what I got here is 7 key process steps, and I grouped it into 5 different checklist formats. So I can actually look at my lean capability, how well my engineers are planning, how much that CAE system is working for me, how my automation technology is performing, whether it's capable of being I4, and so on, right down through the list. So I've got now a way, if I load it with measurements and with I scorecard it, I can then put together performance levels for my system, and I can then generate a readiness survey that's dynamic. I can use it as a baselining process for when I start, and I can also use it as a tool to actually see how I'm doing. So it's also a way for the users to understand Industry 4 and also understand where they're not at and what the gap looks like. And obviously, once you've done that, you then have the ability to build an evolution plan of all the things you need to do in Industry 4 using the tools you've already put in place. And if you need, you can put together, if you're already doing lean, then you'll probably have an organized process for implementing change. But we can help with that if you need it, but you're going to need a very organized process for making change happen, because you are affecting the operating of the business. So what we offer is everything we just said in terms of the readiness survey format, the visioning process, and the ability to actually also bring to the party providers, because we realize that not everybody, not one provider can do everything in Industry 4. It's actually quite a segmented offering. And so what we're offering is a provider syndicate that we can put together to suit the application or study to make sure that we get to the right place. And so when we do the evolution plan, the providers would have helped specify the various components. Now, it's a big undertaking, and that's why I'm recommending a very thorough roadmap to get it done. So my final thoughts is that we're under change. We're under sea change. Canadians are going to see, manufacturers are going to see and experience a lot of change in the next 5-10 years. Globalization is going to change from its current form. It's not working for many people. Long supply chains that are globalized are going to be looked at differently because we got a lot of waste and cash and inventory tied up in them. And we've got, to some degree, a perfect storm of fresh political will in some cases to actually make this happen. It's probably a good time to actually talk it up about manufacturing coming back. Now, Industry 4 is an enabler for TBM, for taking back manufacturing, because it's taking away the differential of labor, and it provides really that slickness that you need to actually be competitive. To do Industry 4, you're going to need strong lean thinking, and that roadmap needs to be integrated because it is a big elephant to eat, and it's going to take time to do. So it needs to be a long haul roadmap that you can sustain with. Other comment I want to give you is that no single provider, we know them, we've searched the market. There's no one single provider providing all the solutions. It's going to be a team effort with a syndicate of people to get to the best solution. So don't waste time inventing the wheel. Time is going to be precious. Get help and get started with that roadmap I mentioned. And the other last thought, I'm sure you'll smile at this, is there's no magic pill or magic wands to do this. It's going to just hard work and planning. So don't rely on those instant answers. Yeah, you got to start leading in the industry, as you always knew you did. Use the disruptive technology to stay in the lead, but be aware that if you don't, the other competitors probably can disrupt you. So with that, I'm leaving you with some articles to take a look at, and I'm going to answer questions. Back to Kevin, right?
That's great, Nigel. Thanks for a great in-depth walk through the history there. And I guess most of us, or a few of us on the call, would have experienced some of that last 10 to 20 years in the change in manufacturing. And with the changes in the COVID world, I think a lot of the take back manufacturing initiatives will have a lot of legs. We're seeing a lot of pickup, obviously, and the initiatives of government investment back into this sector of manufacturing should have some good impact. So in terms of some questions that have come in on the panel during their session, Nigel, there looks like somebody's asking for the silver bullet. What's the single most important step in Industry 4.0 journey?
Vision. Quite frankly, whatever tools you use to get there with vision is fine, but if you don't have a vision of where you want to take this thing, you won't get there. It's just like when you started a lean transformation. Yes, you could chip away at the bits that were obvious, but until you have a vision of how you want to take the business forward, you never make the kind of progress you need. So I think that you don't have to use fancy language, but the vision needs to be clear to everybody, and not just the senior management, but everybody, as to how it's going to change. And that's always, the best way to make change happen. So I'd say the first step is a clear vision. That might take some time to figure out. I'm sure we will have different views. And then the rest is planning. Second will be planning, which is basically the roadmap. But visioning is first up. It's always been.
Great, Nigel. That's awesome. Yeah. Another question's come in on the panel is how do you build the business case for management support?
In terms of the bottom line, yeah, I think it's the business case would be looking at the supply chain as a complete whole, and then understanding the savings that you'll get from moving to either a closed, a local supply chain, but also, obviously there's labor savings. And I want to make a comment there, kind of a high-level comment. I've heard the question that, and by the way, that's the real answer. Is you have to really look at it as a lean study and say, I'm taking out waste. I'm going to use Industry 4 to assist with that, because obviously when you take people out of the process, you remove waste as well. And so it would be just like any other business case. You look at the whole picture, and then you see, do before and after a study and see what the gap provides you.
That's great. Excellent. Thanks. The next one looks like it might be a couple questions embedded in a little narrative here. It says, I'd like to understand the possibilities of joint development programs industry-wide within Canada on Industry 4.0, and how can the process as well as outcomes be beneficial for SMEs? So I think I hear that's talking about other joint ventures to help in this arena. And are there programs that we can participate that get government support to help manufacturing grow in our territory? I'll take a little stab at this, Nigel, because the answer is yes. SHEA is actually involved in, as I'm sure Nigel as well too, on companies like ourselves working with people who are developing technologies that capture information either from machines, put that data into clouds or data lakes, and the ability to report on that information. And the joint ventures, there is a funding program right now that I think injects about $200,000. There's some requirements that there are minimum 3 stakeholders in the project. So somebody could be an artificial intelligence specialist, somebody could be a business process specialist, and somebody could be a lean specialist, as a good example. And you would be looking at developing to take a product to market. And there is a program for that as well too. So if you have questions specifically on that, I could address that too. I wasn't sure, Nigel, did you have any other comments on that?
Yeah, I do. You know, this is an evolving environment. You know, I mean, there are a lot of providers out there that will help you actually with the solutions that you come forward with. Once you go through this process I've got in mind, you would pretty clearly know the projects. So, you know, you'd know the gaps you're trying to fill. When you bring the providers in, they'll be interested in assisting with those projects. And that's when you say, hey, what can I get for, you know, where can I go and get help for this development? So the first step is actually define the projects. Don't be scared. I don't think it's not, you know, it's not PhD level stuff. It's actually solving business problems is quite a journey. So once you define the project, then I think Kevin's point about kicking in support is very appropriate. But what you're going to need is to define the projects that if they're easy, then obviously the providers just provide them. If it's a struggle, if it's new or the application is difficult, then of course the provider and you need to get together and figure out a joint partnership. And I think my view is many of the providers are interested in doing that and helping you get there with that.
Yeah, I can talk to another similar example, but the Industry 4.0, Internet of Things, and that has been around for a little while. Here's a real life story. Joint venture again in Ontario a number of years ago, and what has always amazed me is the farming community has often been a leader in adoption of technology. And two applications that are very common now in farming are data collection from sensors in soil in farm properties that indicate nutrients and water levels and the likes, so that it helps with delivery of fertilizers to where areas it's needed and not overwatering where it isn't. And that is a material cut in cost and increase in production, increase in lack of disease spread as well too. Another interesting one in Ontario that was a joint venture was using robotics and collection of milk from cows. And today every cow in Ontario that's a dairy cow has a chip in it, and it's milked by a robot. And based on locations and farms, they know exactly how much milk is produced by each individual cow on a farm, and compare diets between farms to know who's producing the most milk kind of information. So those are real life examples. And the second one was a consortium that we understand chips and robotics. What can we do with this data? One of the partners would have been the Dairy Farmers of Ontario as well too in that scenario. So those are some great applications, and there's thousands of them out there when you start to think about it.
Yeah, Kevin, what I tend to do is wait until I know the application, and then we can whistle up a lot of comparative case studies. So one of the tricks, you know, one of the things that's I think appropriate is, you know, once we understand the applications, there have got many applications that are similar but different. And I mentioned that, you know, I've been around doing lean a long time, and I see that. I see one industry is doing something which is actually the same thing under a different hat than another industry. You know, it's the same process with a different product. So, you know, one of the things that we do is we don't overload you with case studies until we understand the subject matter, and then we can compare it with other case studies. And there's a lot out there. To your point, you know, not everybody's got a lights out factory yet, but there's been a lot of Industry 4 processes that have been installed to actually save not only cost, but also make sure you got better performance.
Yeah, good. A couple more questions have come in, Nigel. The first one is, are there any grants as of yet, or ones that may be on the horizon? One for a company bringing manufacturing to Canada, to a startup manufacturing company. The answer, I can, more on the grant side, Nigel, I can address that. The answer is, so if you're bringing back manufacturing to Canada, yes, one of the key drivers around many of the federal and provincial grants are building our ability to export, and even export outside of our own provinces. So those are some of the metrics that look at in terms of being eligible or prioritized if there's multiple applicants for grants and training programs. And sometimes those are ongoing as well too. In terms of being a startup company, sometimes they're limited. The government, specifically federally, provincially, do not throw money at startups that are under 2 years old. Now, there are other ones though too, such as a consortium that I mentioned before, that would be a joint venture between 3 companies that would have at least 2 years subject matter expertise and history. So in that case, the funding is to create a new initiative, new intellectual property, or new application of that intellectual property as well too. So hope that answers that question. Another one that comes in, and this will be a good one for you, Nigel, is it possible to implement Industry 4.0 in a manufacturing plant even without a perfect running ERP system?
I think you can get started. I don't think it precludes you from starting to implement Industry 4, but I think you have to keep your eye on the ball and make sure eventually that the ERP system is strong enough to actually eliminate the issues that take place that prevent you from actually taking people out of the equation. I mean, if you look at ERP badly installed, all it does is add more people. And we're trying to get, the hands out of the game. And if you don't have an organized plan, it's very difficult, even with a flexible process, to imagine that you're going to get to Industry 4. I mean, there's many things you can do without an ERP system, but if you want to completely finish the game, you're going to need one. So whether it's a software package or, hey, some people use Excel very efficiently, but it still functions as an ERP system. So you need a business planning tool that gives you the demand management and your bills requirements for your production and your suppliers. If you don't do that, then how are you going to manage, the process itself? So I'd say it's, get started, but don't forget about ERP. You'll need it.
That's great. Thanks, Nigel. Yeah. That's been the questions that come in so far. If there's any other questions that are on your mind still, if you'd like to submit them on the panel, please do so. Otherwise, just in wrap up to today, I want to say thanks to everybody for coming out. Hope the information that we provided today has been valuable to you. And in the event that you do have any additional questions, you can reach out to us at the information provided on the screen to you. There will be a copy of the recording posted shortly, and you'll receive a link of that for those of you who attended. And we appreciate you spending the time with us. We hope you do get a vision for a 4.0 journey, and look walking with you shoulder to shoulder over the next few months and years to achieve that. Thanks again for coming out today, and have a great day.